Hi, I'm Natalie Bouchard, and you're listening to Inside NC Labor, a podcast designed to inform and educate North Carolina citizens on the role that the Department of Labor plays in state government. Hi everyone, welcome to Inside NC Labor. I'm Natalie Bouchard, and today we have a very special guest. Jeremy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Jeremy Smith. I'm with the Boiler Safety Bureau, the Assistant Bureau Chief, and I've been here, started in about 5 years now, actually 5 years this October, so I'm on my 5 years here, and started off as an inspector, was there for about 3.5 years, and then spent little over 6 months, 8 months as a supervisor, and then moved up to the bureau chief or assistant chief now. So
great. It's great to have you.
Thank you. Yeah.
The Boiler Safety Bureau is so interesting to me because a lot of people don't even know that it falls within the Department of Labor. So
that's correct. We sometimes have to explain to people that this is a requirement by state law, that anything that operates under pressure that has a potential to essentially become a bomb and explode and cause some damage to property and people, that it is a requirement to have it inspected, and we get that quite a bit. A lot of calls that we have to field and things like that. But it's the main purpose is to make sure that things are operating safely at businesses and festivals and things like that. Mm-hmm. So.
And I was telling, we had Don Kinney on the podcast before, and we talked to him about the bureau and how it's kind of a good thing that a lot of people don't necessarily know about it, because it means that no, accidents or incidents are really happening.
Right. That's right. And that's what we want to try to avoid, anything like that, and make sure that people are doing, they have the correct safeties, the correct maintenance, and everything that is associated with these boilers and vessels that can cause some damage for sure. Mm-hmm.
So today we kind of wanted to focus on a special category of boilers, historical boilers. So would you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we do historical boilers. They're also referred to as exhibition boilers. These are a lot of, these boilers were manufactured back in the 1900s. They were used, they're they're traction steam engines. They were used in the fields to plow. Some of them are hooked up to sawmills. So we have a standard that we inspect them to. It's the National Board Inspection Code that gives you a rundown on how to inspect, what to look for, and so we go. A lot of these are displayed. They're privately owned, where one person may own one, and then there's some festivals that are put on where it's one person that owns a bunch of them. So we go in there and do the inspections. We come in and make sure that they're operating correctly, so that way there isn't an incident when you have families and children and people walking around to be there for the festival.
Close quarters.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right.
Potentially
and
dangerous.
A lot of people, these things were manufactured and built many years ago, and some of the code standards that we have today for inspections because of those things, were causing problems and killing people back when they were first manufactured. Right. And the technology manufacturing wasn't what it is today. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the code standards that we enforce and inspect to were because of those things causing people causing people to lose their lives and damage and things like that. So it's it's a throwback to back then. So these things are really cool to look at and inspect, because it's almost like you go back in time a little bit to see how they were manufactured and how they're run and what they were used for as well too.
Yeah. So what are some things you look for specifically on the historic boilers?
Well, these are special cases. So when we get called about some of these, we look in our system to see if they've ever been inspected here before. If they have not, then we have to do an initial inspection, which is we go in there, we take thickness measurements, and because these are manufactured for a certain pressure, and so when they manufacture them for that certain pressure, they have to have a minimum thickness. So if that minimum thickness is no longer there, if they've been sitting out in the field rusting, pitting, thinning out that material, then we will adjust what they can operate it at for the pressure. We have the code standard that we look at, and it has a graph that we can use to say, okay, this is what you need to operate it at for that one. So part of that initial inspection is taking those thickness measurements. We also require them to do an operating, where they put a fire in the furnace, operate it up. It goes up, runs up to whatever pressure we have it at to put the relief valve, so that way we can make sure that relief valve does lift and releases some of that pressure, because that's the last line of defense to keep that boiler from essentially blowing up and exploding is that valve lifts to release that steam pressure to keep it from, like I said, exploding. And then we also do an external. We check all of the portions of it. They have to have a gauge glass, a water gauge glass, which shows the water level that's in there to make sure that it's constantly at a certain level. Also check gauges, pressure gauges, to make sure they're working. And then, so there's about, for the first initial, it takes, for one, to do one first initial one, it takes 2 inspectors probably a good day and a half, because we have to do multiple readings of the thickness, the operating. We also do a hydrostatic test, which is we put water in it, fill it up with water, and then it's not putting a fire on it, but we put pressure on it. And that pressure has to be 1.5 times the operating pressure. So if you've got one that's 100 psi, we put water, pump that pressure up to it to 150, and we check to make sure there's no water leaks coming from anywhere inside that boiler, because that's a sign that it's got leaks. So for the first initial one, they go through the whole portion of that. And then once if that passes and goes through, we hang a tag on it and say you can operate it. And then the next year, when we come back, because these will get looked at every year, they have to operate. Okay. And then we come back and then say the next year we may do I'm trying to think of an interval. We'll have to go through our procedure, but then we go through the next time we come back and may do just an external. They don't have to go through the whole process again. It's just taking one of those things the next year. So one year it may be we just come in and do a visual inspection and look at it. Then the next year we come back and say, okay, you need to operate it and show us to operate. Then the next year we may come back and do a hydrostatic test and do the pressure test on it.
Is that kind of random, or is it really there's a set?
Yes, okay. that the National Board Inspection Code shows out, tells you which interval it is. So yeah, we were talking about the inspections for these. We do the initial one the very first time, and that is where we do also calculations to based on the size and get the heating surface to then lead to what we give them the pressure to operate it at. So once we have that pressure after we've taken the thickness measurements, then we do a hydro test, a hydrostatic test, which is where we put water, pumping up the pressure. The standard or the code requires it to be 1.5% or 1.5 times the pressure that's on there. So if you have a 100 psi boiler, the hydrostatic test would have to be 150 psi. And then we make sure there's no leaks coming from that. We also do a visual inspection and an operating inspection where they put a fire in the furnace and operate it, so that way we can see the relief valve lift, we can see the pressure gauges working, and all the different components that come with those. So after that's done, we assign it a number, and it's in our system. So then when we come back the next year, we do different intervals based on what to do at that point. So the first interval is mainly just an in-service inspection. So after we do the initial, which is everything that we've done, we come back the next year and do an in-service where it's basically just an operating. They do the same thing, put a fire in there, lift the relief valve, everything's working good, we're good to go for this year. So then the next year, interval 2, we just do a visual where we come out and just do an external visual. They don't have to operate it, but we check to make sure everything's still in place and things are good for that externally wise. And then interval 3, we do the pressure test again. So come back and do a hydrostatic test. So, and then after interval 3, it resets and goes back to interval 4, but it's the same thing as interval 1. So it's another in-service. And then interval 5 and 2 are the same, where we come back and do just the visual. And then interval 6 is another pressure test, exactly like interval 3. Once we go through interval 6, it goes right back to interval 1 again. So once you get that initial inspection and going through everything, the next years that follow after that, you usually just have to do one thing, whether it's one of those intervals there with that one. So that's how we kind of continue to do the inspection process and monitor what they're doing and making sure that the boiler is operating like it should be. It's not causing any. It's holding pressure as well. That's where we come and do the pressure test. So each one, so we don't do the whole initial inspection each time. They just get in a different interval each time we go there. So, I mean, there's some now that we've been there for 8+ years now, so they're already on their second and sometimes third cycle going through those intervals. Yeah. So, yep. Yeah.
I have a question really quick about the, we talk about with the elevator and amusement device, specifically when we've been talking about the rides at the fair. I don't know if you use the same form of like testing for the thickness, like the non-destructive testing.
Yes.
It's like almost like an ultrasound. Is
That's
it like
exactly
that
what it's called.
Okay.
UT. It's a UT inspection. Yeah. So the ultrasonic testing is what is the term for it. So it's basically just you put it on our UT reader, and you basically just put it on the metal, and it'll give you a readout of how thick it is. And so what we do is, like I said, we take many points to look at and take thickness measurements.
Right.
So we go around everywhere and point up, and if we see an area that's thinning or that's a little bit smaller, then that obviously will drop some of the pressure that we'll allow it to run at.
Right.
So once we do that for an initial, we give them a pressure to run it at and say, hey, this is what you need to put a relief valve on to operate it safely. Because like I said, a lot of these were manufactured back in the early 1900s, so it's hard to tell exactly what it is. So we offer that service. Sometimes some companies will bring in an actual, what they call an NDE, non-destructive examination person to come in there and do that. And they're, sometimes, may have a little bit more better trained and things like that. But we do offer that service to at least take the thickness measurements to be able to say, okay, offer it, run it at this pressure for that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay. So there's an event coming up in the first weekend in November, which is around the time this podcast is going to be released, so perfect time. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this is, it's called Etterville. Takes place in Carthage, North Carolina, which is right around the Southern Pines area. And their festival is, I think they call it the 100 Years of Machinery. And they have stuff out there from Caterpillars, Caterpillar big construction and land moving equipment to international tractors. It's amazing the amount of equipment they have out there. And we go there because part of their festival is they operate some of these historical exhibition boilers. And we go out there to make sure that everything is, the ones that they want to operate are working and are safe. What we do is we know it comes out usually this fall. It's about this time every year. So we usually about the beginning of summer we send out an email saying, hey, do you guys have an idea how many which engines you would like to run and display during the festival? They get back with us with a list, and then I take that, or our supervisors will take that, and we look to see, okay, this has been here before, this is what we did last year, so this is what's due now. And if it hasn't been, then like I said, that's when we go through the whole initial first time inspection if they haven't been there. So once we go through everything and say it's good to go, then they can operate it there that day, depending on what we say, hey, you need to do it at that portion or anything like that. So
do you know typically how many machines they have?
They have quite a bit out there. Some of them we've inspected before and we don't allow them to operate it. We were just out there in the September doing some, and they had a first initial one that they wanted to bring out. Two of our guys were on it doing the thickness measurements for a good day. Next day we came back to do the hydro test and wound up finding that it was leaking. So we basically told them that they had to get it repaired or get it fixed or they wouldn't be able to run it. So they have quite a bit out there, as I said, so he was able to say, okay, we're going to not use that one, we'll bring out this other one and see. And right then I was able to pull up on my computer to say, okay, this one was done, this one's been registered before, so it's due for this, so let's get that one going as well too. So they have a number of them out there. To how many they have, I don't 100% know that. Right. This year, I think we're doing 7 already, and we have to go back. When we go back the day before the festival, we've got to do 4 more. So that's a total of 11 there that they're going to try and operate during the festival.
And you all started this back in September.
Yes. Yeah. Well, so we've already been there once, and they're depending on what interval they're at. We work with them to say, okay, let's get these a couple of these done here. There's some of them that are just need an operating inspection. So we worked with them to say, hey, you'll have more people here at this portion. We'll do the operating one since it's close to the festival or for the show. That's why we sometimes split it up in that way, because when we went in September, as you get closer to the festival, they have more people there that can help and do some things as well too. But we try to, since there's quite a number of them that they want to do, we try to get as many done as we can. That way we're not waiting until the last minute to get them done as well too. So. And
Natalie and I actually get to go out there next week with you all, so we're super excited about that, to watch some inspections.
Yes, it's good. I hope, because to see these things operate, I mean, it's pretty amazing. And, where you're looking at, man, these things were manufactured now going on 100 years ago, if not even more than that. And just to think that's how one of the main pieces of machinery that they used back then for farming equipment, for anything that was on there, that they needed for that. And it's pretty amazing to watch these things. And like I said, when we're there doing it, it gives you a little bit of that. This is why we're doing it, because you can see that how the power these things have and what can happen if they're not correctly, if something goes wrong. Exactly. Right. So,
are there any specific challenges between historical boilers and, I guess, modern day boilers, like different things?
There's some of the same components that are there.
Right.
The boilers that were manufactured back then were manufactured a different way. A lot of rivets, and which now you rarely see any rivets at all in new boilers. Typically, two ways to do it is welding and rivets. And rivets are basically when you take it's like taking a bolt and taking two sheets of metal and putting the bolt in between it, and then using that as its connection instead of actually welding it there.
Okay, got it.
So that's why the welding is a little bit more, you see that a lot more now. There's better procedures, better standards that we use those for. Rivets are, especially in the manufacturing of those, is one of the reasons why we go out there and do them, because, like I said, these things, sometimes when they buy them and get them from other places, they've been sitting out in a field for years, and water, condensation, rust will get in there and cause those rivets to, it can cause it to separate, or even cause some problems, some deterioration or things for those rivets there. So that's the main difference with those. We don't really see much rivets now, but there are still some of the same components that we see today for those. So and like I said, that's another issue itself, is that some of these boilers have been sitting in fields forever, collecting moisture and things like that. So that's where we have to go in there and take the thickness measurements where some of that metal may be thinning there. So
got it. Okay, anything else you want to add?
No, I think that'll do it. Yeah.
Well, we look forward to next week, and thank y'all so much for keeping us safe out there.
No problem. Thank you for having me, and we look forward to having y'all there next week.
Thanks so much for tuning in, y'all. Remember, your safety is our priority.